To use up some time, I thought to myself, what could I talk about up here? And I am overwhelmed beyond belief at the love that I have gotten from strangers all over the world, simply because we align ideologically around the best money in the world. And it kind of keeps blowing my mind. I'm this older guy. I lived in one area my whole life. The people I always knew lived all around me. I grew up surfing, it's been my life. I have a core group of friends. We're a unique breed of people. We really resonate with each other as surfers. You can meet a surfer anywhere in the world and you're friends automatically. Similar in Bitcoin. It's hard to express, but I think a lot of people here know what I'm talking about. Some of you may know, a little over a year ago, I'm a bit of a shit poster on Twitter, and I posted some stuff, and some rich scammer dude called me out on it, and I was absolutely blown away. The entire Bitcoin community rallied behind me, just this regular dude, a pleb in the Bitcoin community, but everybody just jumped on this dude. This is a famous guy. I don't even want to bring his name up because he doesn't deserve the attention, but I was just blown away. The love that came from all over the world towards me was beyond belief. And our next speaker is a similar type of guy, meaning I meet this guy, he doesn't know me, he just ideologically aligned around Bitcoin, and we chat. I met him a couple years ago at another conference, and I hadn't seen him in a few years. We maybe communicate over Twitter, but I see him the other night at the poker game. We walk up to each other, hug each other like long lost brothers, and then we immediately into like a half-hour conversation about all things Bitcoin and life and whatnot. It's just like a giant family of people. And I would encourage all you folks here, introduce yourselves, shake hands, find out how they got into Bitcoin, tell them how you did, where you live, what you do, whatever amount of information you want to expose about yourself. We do have to be cognizant about the fact that we are trying to overturn the power structure of the world through the monetary system. So OPSEC is somewhat important. Not everybody wants to go by their full names or their names at all. You see people in costumes on purpose because this is a little bit of a dangerous area. But we are a community that embraces each other and we help each other. Quick side note, yesterday I'm speaking to a gentleman from Lake Tahoe. His fiat job was affected by COVID. He wants to be working in the Bitcoin space. We had a long talk. I'm trying to encourage him. This morning, happened to be talking to somebody totally different who says, I want to go to Tahoe and build something. And I'm like, those two should talk. And then I saw the guy and I said, go talk to that person. And they're connected now. And that's how it goes. We are helping each other. I just want everybody to embrace that. I think it's part of the ethos of this community. So, let's all be a big happy family and change the world. What do you say? All right, so our next speaker, he is one of these technical guys, one of these brainiac dudes. He works on Bitcoin at the core level, which I can't even understand, but what he does benefits me, so I love the guy. Justin Moon, come on up here and show the people what you know.
Can you hear me? That good?
Thanks, brother.
All right. It's great to be here. I went to every one of these things for about 2 or 3 years and made a lot of friends. And I haven't been to one in probably 2 years since COVID. And it's good to see some old friends again. A lot of you I haven't seen for a couple years. But a lot of you I had seen in Austin. We ended up starting a little meetup there. And it became like kind of a little pilgrimage while the conference circuit was closed. So it's great to be here at Unconfiscatable, because that's, I guess when you think about Bitcoin, what's interesting about it, there's kind of two things. It's a thing that you can own that people can't steal from you, right? And that's what Unconfiscatable means. And then it's you can send it, and no one can stop the transaction, right? It's an unstoppable transaction that you can, and this is what's unique, and this is what the world needs, right? And it's sometimes when we talk about these things, we're very confident, right? You cannot take my Bitcoin, you cannot stop this transaction, right? I think there's sort of a sense in which we believe that we can't lose. You know, we believe that Bitcoin's going to, it's inevitable, that we're like, we have a sense of destiny. We're going to win no matter what, you know, and you see a lot of this on Twitter, Reddit, social media. We're very confident, and one problem with this is that if we actually believe that, you know, Bitcoin is going to win, that it's going to take over, that you as an individual don't really have much of a role to play. You know, you sort of don't have any agency. You don't matter, right? And if you like look back in history, and I done some reading in history and listened to some podcasts and stuff, some ebooks recently, and you look at people who attained true sovereignty, groups of people, right? They didn't really act this way. they believed in agency. They believed in power. They believed in politics. You know, and a lot of these things we sort of don't believe in, right? We, as a people, we sort of we like to wait. We like to run. You know, we sort of like to hide. You know, we complain a lot. We like to tweet. And we sort of are primarily interested in kind of stacking sats, right? If we can't play a role in the success or failure of the project, one thing that's left is to just make as much money as you can, so that after the inevitable success, you can kind of rebuild the world or enjoy it as much as possible, right? And so this is just not this is not how sovereigns in the past acted, right? They were they didn't wait, they didn't run, they didn't hide, they didn't tweet. It's sort of a different look. So, you know, one thing that's great about our culture is that we have these fantastic memes, right? We have we're very good at condensing knowledge into like 2 or 3 words, right? And one of my favorites is Bitcoin fixes this. It's a fantastic meme. You know, it communicates the idea that, you know, if you have a corrupt money, if you have a dishonest money that is easy to steal and hard to transact with, right, the opposite of Bitcoin, it sort of corrupts everything because it's in the middle of every single economic transaction, right? And Bitcoin fixes this is a you know, a 3-word meme that sort of communicates that if you replace this dishonest money with a more honest one, a more fair money, that it could remove a lot of corruption from society. And it's a great meme, you know, but it isn't literally true. It isn't. It's the map, not the territory. So a great example of this recently is this Honk Honk Hodl fundraiser, right? There's this interesting protest in Canada, bottom up, like Bitcoin, leaderless, like Bitcoin, a lot of normal people wanting freedom, like Bitcoin. And so I think they were on Patreon or something like that, and they got canceled. And so, you know, some well-meaning Bitcoiners said, okay, Bitcoin fixes this. Let's use Bitcoin instead of Patreon and dollars and all that. And they sort of just assumed that it would work, right? They assumed that, you know, that success was inevitable, right? And so they didn't think about how to distribute the money to the truckers, right? To a leaderless movement. How are you going to get the money to the people, right? To my understanding, they were all Canadian nationals, subject to the laws of the place, right? And what they were doing is illegal. And, you know, in a global system, maybe it would have been better to have people outside of Canada running this fundraiser. And then there was an obvious person involved. I guess I won't say who, but there was a very suspicious person involved who ended up, you know, giving all the money to the cops in the end. You probably shouldn't have involved this person. So this is a really interesting example of, you know, but when Bitcoin doesn't fix this, right? Our sense of kind of like apathy and overconfidence led to kind of an embarrassing situation right here. And another interesting meme we have is you know, the idea of a pleb, right? A couple years ago, Bitcoin Twitter and the social media stuff started to be like overrun by influencers and grifters and stuff, and this pleb movement arose, being like, hey, it's a protest against all these influencers taking over, sort of like kind of a declaration that people didn't want to follow these leaders, maybe, and a bottom-up sort of movement, right? And so from that perspective, it was very cool. But you know, I think people stopped, like you think about how we want the post-hyper Bitcoinization world to look, right? We probably want to be more like nobles than peasants, right? And sometimes some of the discussion on Twitter, the toxicity and all that. I think we took the word pleb a little too literally, perhaps, as much as the movement was great in the beginning. Another one is have fun staying poor. It's a very funny meme. It's very funny when a hedge fund manager insults Bitcoin and some pleb goes and says, have fun staying poor to a billionaire. It's it's pretty hilarious, right? It's a great meme. It's a great meme. It communicates that you either have Bitcoin or you don't, and that's where the world is going, and you should own some, right? And if you don't, you're poor. But it's sort of the opposite of why. Literally, it's the opposite of I think what we like about Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is a world where you can sort of make everybody rich, right? Where everybody can be independent, self-sovereign, right? There's a slogan I like more than have fun staying poor. It's every man a king, This is from American socialist Huey Long. Every man a king, right? How does a socialist have a better slogan than we do? It's kind of a thing to think about, right? Like, I think sometimes, just to summarize this sort of set of talking points, I think sometimes we've taken our memes a little too seriously. They're great as memes, but they're not literally true. So another thing I want to talk about is that, I introduced this saying like, Bitcoiners have this sense of destiny and a sense of fate, and that we're going to win, right? Which is great. But one of the consequences is you don't really have agency, right? And like individuals don't really participate in history. That's kind of the world. We have like an end of history worldview. Like, oh, we figured it out, right? All done, which I want to question a little bit. At the same time we talk about individualism, right? We're interested in individualism and not collectivism. Yet we don't really believe that individuals have much of a role to play in the success or failure of the project, right? This is what I would contend. I don't think we all like totally believe this either, but I think we do more than we should. And so one example here that I think of is a really interesting example of like one person that made a really big difference. And I always struggle to pronounce his name, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He was a Russian author, lived in the gulags, and he wrote a book. It was like the first book that was published after the Soviets took over. It was like A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich or something like that. And it just sort of honestly portrayed life in the gulags. I didn't read that book, but I read his next one. He sort of he became sort of like a beacon of like truth and honesty in the Soviet Union. And so all these normal people started sending him letters of what it was like in their community, what it was like to live in the gulags, all the horrible things that had happened to them. And eventually this was published as a book called The Gulag Archipelago. And it sort of like undermined the moral legitimacy of the Soviet Union. Because at the time, a lot of Western people actually admired the Soviet Union. They thought it was a more fair system. This book comes out, kind of like Bitcoin. It's like a bottom-up thing, just individual people writing letters, a letter campaign. And then one guy's like, okay, well, I'll risk my life and publish it, right? And so this was, copied by hand, passed around, read at night, stuff like that. And this is one guy. If this Alexander didn't make these risks, I mean, maybe the Soviet Union is still around, right? Of all these individual people who wrote letters, they risked their lives as well. So it's like an interesting role where like a bunch of individual people actually can really make a difference. So on the other side, like, why the hell, if you're the Soviet Union, would you let this guy publish this book? Like what a blunder, right? So I guess I want to cast some doubt on that idea that one person couldn't be the thing that makes or breaks Bitcoin. I think maybe it could be the case that it could come down to one person, right? If you don't believe that, then why try? Why not just act in pure self-interest at all times? So think for a second, let's assume that Bitcoin does fail, right? What if Bitcoin fails? What is the world going to look like? Where are you going to live? What kind of food are you going to eat? Are you going to be able to travel, right? Like if Bitcoin's kind of the last stand of freedom and it fails, what is the world going to look like? And I did some introspection recently. I started thinking along these lines, and I kind of asked myself, if it failed, how do I know it wasn't me that killed it, right? Like, that I couldn't have done something better along the way. And I think for me personally, there's not a lot of like sins of commission, like things that I did that were bad. But I think there are a lot of errors of omission, right? Things that I could have done that I didn't do. And I think that's true of a lot of my friends in Bitcoin. There's more that we could do. And so I'd like to just pose that question just as something to think about. If it failed, how do you know that you weren't the straw that broke the camel's back? And if you wanted to live your life in such a way that you weren't that straw, what would you do differently? And okay, so I have one more thing. Assume that Bitcoin fails, right? Think about that. But what if it succeeds, right? It's not black and white, right? Like, we could have a world where Bitcoin takes over, it becomes the world reserve currency, this and that. But there's many different ways that this could play out, right? Like, who leads this conversion, right? Is it an ETF? Is it bankers? Is it Wall Street, right? Is it a top-down, like, is the last leg of adoption here top-down, right? Do the oligarchs end up with half the Bitcoin, right? And what does that mean, right? Or is it more of a bottom-up thing, like was discussed in this last panel, right? Do the truckers get some Bitcoin, right? Do productive blue-collar people get more Bitcoin, right? I think these are two very different worlds. Like one scene I like the best that is sort of what I guess I fear about how it could play out. There's this movie, Hypernormalization, and in the movie it portrays basically how the financialization of the world. And there's a scene where in like 1972 there's a bond offering in New York City, and the city expects that bankers will show up and buy these municipal bonds and then resell them, right? And the offering's at noon, no one shows up. 1 p.m., no one shows up. 2 p.m., no one shows up, right? And basically the bankers refused to participate and eventually formed they agreed to buy bonds under the condition that they sort of created a new council to run the city, right? And it was like something like 8 seats on this council, and 7 of them were commercial bankers, right? So like the bankers sort of took over New York City. And I would hope that it's not some sort of like, that when we renegotiate the new world after Bitcoin succeeds, if we assume it succeeds, like, who's going to be at that table, right? Who's going to be at that table to actually sort of like negotiate what the political structures are going to be? I'd hope it would be some of us. I hope it wouldn't be the people at Coinbase or Binance or FTX. And I think that's the path we're on right now, is that they'll be the ones representing us. Another thing is, like, did society collapse, right? Bitcoin wins. It becomes a global reserve currency. Is it just a smoldering wreck? Is it, that's something I would, this previous panel sort of expressed that as well. I hope we don't go down that road. Another question is, how do we organize, right? Like, let's say Bitcoin takes over and we have to rebuild the world. We're like the least likely group ever to rebuild the world. We're a bunch of disagreeable libertarian nerds. We're keyboard warriors, right? Being honest, we're not the most likely people to succeed here, but maybe we could improve. It's something to think about. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna skip some of these next points, keep it short and sweet. It's like I guess I'm trying to present some different points of view that I haven't heard, that I've been thinking about. And then so the question is, what can you actually do, right? If you think if maybe it's possible that you could make or break Bitcoin, and not to be like cocky about it, but I think you should sort of have that point of view. Like, what could you actually do? And I think one thing that is really good about in Bitcoin right now is meetups. Like, there's not enough meetups, and the ones that exist are really powerful. They coordinate a group of people that that wouldn't otherwise know each other, and it's sort of like a bedrock that we can build broader Bitcoin community on. So that's one thing I started a meetup a couple years ago, basically because I knew there were people in Austin, and I couldn't get them to hang out with me. On Twitter, I DM'd them, and they're like, yeah, sometime. So I started a little meetup, and it was 2 people, 3 people, 10 people, 15 people. A year later, 25. The next year, 50, 100. Now it's 200 people every month, right? So it's like, it's this community was already, it was just waiting to happen, right? So I think that's something that you could really think about, you know. Another phrase I hear a lot this last year is like, call your senator, right? I don't know if this is, I don't know, this reminds me of like the ETF-driven top-down worldview, right? Like begging for an ETF to save us, right? It's sort of a contradiction, you know. We're begging senators, we're begging for ETFs. Meanwhile, we kind of think we're destined to win. There's a little bit of a contradiction there. So I don't know, like instead of calling your senator, maybe become your senator, right? You know, we saw a lot of complaining on Twitter the last year. For a while, it became like COVID Twitter, right? I don't know a single person who ran for office in their local jurisdiction and solved things. You know, I know a lot of people who tweeted about it for 18 months, 2 years. I don't know anybody who actually fixed it where they live, which is to me very concerning. And so I guess I painted a bit of a caricature of what a Bitcoiner is. Like you know, I'm trying to make a point, exaggerating a little bit. So you know, to think of like the opposite of this caricature as like think of something you could do. You know, instead of waiting, hiding, tweeting, complaining. These sorts of things, stacking sats, right? Just being concerned with how much Bitcoin you yourself own. What would be like the opposite of that, right? Like one thing I think about is like, what if you just lived out of a backpack for a couple years, just went from church to church, tried to get them to accept donations, have a treasury, teach kids how to do their allowance, families how to do their allowance through, you know, using Bitcoin, how to save for the future. You wouldn't make a lot of money doing this. You certainly wouldn't become an influencer. You wouldn't get famous. No one would know. But I think, you know, if we did succeed, you'd have a lot of people that would be thankful, and you'd help make, you know, a Bitcoin world much more positive, much more bottom up, much more community oriented. And so this is just a couple things I've been thinking about that I wanted to get up here and share, maybe a different point of view. So thanks for listening, and yeah, if you have any comments about this, come say hi to me afterwards. Thanks a lot.